Am I the asshole for not inviting my sister to my wedding? BC she cried. Rape on my fiancé? This might be long but I apologize. My sister Ellie has issues. Not sure which issues, she's never seen a doctor or been diagnosed. My sister has always had a need to be center of attention. When she was in middle school, she harmed herself to look like she got jumped at school. Freshman year of high school she put herself in the hospital for stabbing herself in the arm several times with scissors because my parents grounded her. These are just some of the many psychotic things my sister has done. Well, in junior year, my sister cried rape on this guy John. We believed her, then when my dad showed up at John's house and the police were called, my sister admitted she was lying, admitted she had a big crush on John and he rejected her. 7 years later John and I worked together. We fell in love. We had our first child 6 months ago, and our wedding is scheduled for December. As our date approached, my sister reached out and told me she still didn't get her invite. I told her I wasn't comfortable having her at my wedding. We don't see her much. BC of what she did, she said that was unfair and she couldn't miss her sister's wedding. I said that was perfectly fair, especially since her past with John. She said that was unfair of me to hold that over her head since it was so many years ago, and that she was family and she deserved to go. I told her that wouldn't be happening, and said I was sorry. She then called my mom, who called me, trying to persuade me to let my sister go because it's not her fault she has issues. I refused. My sister then called me hysterically, accusing me of stealing the life she always wanted and saying how sorry she was and begging me to go. I hung up. Am I the asshole?
Am I the asshole for refusing to raise my sister's baby now that she's passed away? I'm 19F, living in London, attending university studying medicine. I'm about to start my second year of med. My sister passed away midway through my first year and my parents have been taking care of my niece. My niece is only 15 months old. My father suffers from hearing loss and finds it hard to take care of her without the presence of my mum. For around the past 2 years my mum has been going to the hospital around 3 to 4 days a week for these treatments while she waits on the transplant list for a kidney replacement. So most days everything is fine for him, but sometimes get very agitated and distressed. Last week my parents told me to try and get home earlier. When I came home to both my parents sat in the living room with serious faces. I was scared. They ended up both breaking down and telling me that raising the baby was just too much for them and that the stress of the baby was too much for even my mum and it was affecting her blood pressure, which in turn would start to affect her treatments. They said that they have been thinking about it and think that I would be the best option. They began saying things like I could take a break and restart at a later year and it's the sacrifice I have to make for my family, etc. And whilst I understand what they mean, I don't agree and I can't just leave everything and raise a child. It makes me feel sick even typing this because I sound so selfish, but how could I even begin raising a child when I barely remember to even eat meals myself? Some days I study for house at a time and forget to even have a meal, so how could I now remember to feed a child? Another point that I just can't let go is the fact that I would have to stop my studies, that I have worked hard to be where I am. I felt so conflicted and torn and I tried to express this as best as I could and they eventually let it go and said that they would try and do their best with my help. I just feel so guilty. My father used to suffer from severe depression when I was growing up because of his alcohol addiction. When he quit and became sober for me and my sister, he really struggled, and a lot of the time the smallest things used to really tick him off. Now he gets easily stressed, so when my niece is fussy and cries a lot he gets very stressed out, and because most of the time he can't hear her crying, he can't understand when something is wrong, or what exactly she is crying for, because he can't hear the cry anymore. Yesterday my father asked to speak to me, and when he did my heart really broke. He opened up about the difficulties he has been going through because of his hearing loss and how it has been really affecting him during the time he has spent with my niece. He told me about how when me and my sister were babies he was able to understand us so much more better and even be able to identify the different types of cries, and when it was that we needed milk or food or when we needed our diaper changed. He explained how now he struggles with understanding her because he can't even hear her cry, and I felt bad for him. He began to break down into tears and I broke down with him. We both cried, and when my mum was at the door he quickly put himself together and apologized for crying. He apologized for crying. He told me it's fine and he is just being dramatic and to not get upset, and then left the room and then signed "I love you" before he left. I've been sat here for the past 3 hours just at a loss of words. I want to continue to cry my heart out, but the tears stopped coming 2 hours ago. I just feel numb. I feel lost. I know deep within that raising a baby is just too much for my parents, and I know that I can't balance med school with raising a child, so what other option do we have other than giving away the baby for adoption? So am I really a horrible person if I refuse to raise her? Am I the asshole for refusing to pay my mother to babysit my 8-year-old daughter? My mother and I have a very good relationship. She has also babysat my daughter more times than I count for free. The only time I've ever paid her for babysitting was when I had to leave for a work trip or something of that sort and I need her to babysit my daughter for at least a week. The rate was $115 per day, which I think is very reasonable. Last week, I told my mother that I needed her to watch my daughter for a couple hours while I did some errands. And she told me that she won't continue to babysit my daughter unless I start paying her for every hour, not just for the long trips. I refused, because what kind of grandparent asks to be paid to watch their grandchild for a few hours? We got into a pretty heated argument and so I had to bring my daughter along with me, which was not great. I couldn't find anyone else who was available to take her in and her father is not in the picture. He didn't want anything to do with our daughter, and when we got divorced, the child support payments alone barely cover the bare necessities for her. One of my friends who had met up with me asked why I brought her along, and when I told her that because I refused to pay my mother to babysit for just a few hours, I had no one else that I could hire and trust on such short notice. She told me that I should pay my mother for babysitting every time and not just for the work trips because the poor old woman is spending her time and energy on a kid at her age, which I don't even know what that means. I never recalled my grandmother asking to be paid to watch me. That wasn't even fathomable, and she had babysat me until I was a teenager, so I was pretty much aware. I don't know. Am I the asshole? To answer some questions, my mother is very well off. I only ask her to babysit once or twice a week at most, sometimes maybe only 2 times for a whole month. The rest of the time I pay a nanny to watch my daughter, but during the time she isn't available I ask my mother. I'm also an only child. My mother is in her early 60s and she always enjoyed spending time with her granddaughter.
Am I the asshole for letting my son flaunt his lifestyle in front of his less fortunate cousins? My husband and I only have one child, our son Gorham, who is 14. We love him to death and spoil him lots, but we also are trying to shape him into a humble and appreciate person. Thankfully we've never had any issues. He's a very quiet and well-mannered boy. He volunteers and is well liked among his peers. My sister has 5 kids ranging from 18 to 8. Recently we were all attending my mother's birthday party. My mother was asking my son about how his sports are going, and his studies. He's doing cross-country right now to prepare for lacrosse in the spring, and he recently started at the high school building at his academy. He was very excited and shared with his grandmother about how much he likes the school. One of my sister's boys started whining about how it's not fair that Gorham gets to go to private school and wear nicer clothes and other things. 2 of her other kids started agreeing and whining. They complained that they wanted to play sports too. My sister can't afford to buy equipment and doesn't have time to take them to events. I felt bad for them and stayed quiet, letting them vent. I don't think it's fair to them that my sister had more kids than she can reasonably provide for. They're always scraping by because feeding and clothing so many kids is expensive. But my sister had the audacity to lecture me about how I shouldn't let Gorham talk about things that his cousins don't have. I feel like talking about being excited for school and sports is a normal thing for a teenage boy. It's not like he was talking about how much his shoes cost or something dickish like that. Also, his grandmother was asking him questions. He was mostly replying to her questions. I stood up for us, but my sister and I aren't talking. My parents took my side and think she's taking her issues out on me, but our brother thinks I should just let it go and apologize. Edit. My son just told me that his cousin told him that my sister made her own post. Yikes.